Joe Burrow has been a fantasy gold mine, but if the Bengals keep losing, their offense could lose steam. We react to the best, worst, and most surprising performances of Week 11 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk. When I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. We have so much to get through from Week 11. There was a lot of amazing performances, some really disappointing performances, and then there's still like guys coming out of nowhere and surprising us, or now have put together a couple good weeks in a row that we need to discuss and see if we trust them moving forward. Let's start right at the top here with the best performances of the week, and it starts last night on Sunday Night Football. Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert did exactly what we wanted them to do. Great offenses. Herbert, better first half than second half, but gave you exactly what you wanted in fantasy if you started him. Joe Burrow now finishes with a huge week. Poor guy, 356 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, but loses the game, and the Bengals fall to 4-7. Are you a bit worried about Joe Burrow and T. Higgins and Jamar Chase if they keep losing and lose that motivation?
Yeah, the good thing is that they're still in the race for the wild card because the best team right now is the Broncos, and they did have a big win. That was one of the biggest surprises, the way they dominated the Falcons this week. We'll get into that in a little bit, but yeah, so as long as they're alive for the wild card, which they are, and they do get to play the Broncos, by the way, later in the year, so they just have to get a little closer, make it happen. As long as that's there, as long as a lot of teams like the Dolphins, you put them in that category, the Colts, as long as these teams just have enough to play for, they're going to produce. And look, Jamar Chase is looking for the big deal. T. Higgins is trying to get a deal. So these guys are motivated to play. I mean, that's the one thing about the NFL is like you have to play not just for your team now, but your team later as well. So I know they're frustrated, but I mean, they win the game probably if they can make a field goal or convert and get a little closer for that field goal. So just a few little things, or even if they had a decent first half, they're going to win the game. So when you look at it, I mean, the Bengals are not executing. There's something off, right? They can't align their offense and defense. It's kind of the opposite of what we saw during their Super Bowl run. But they have Joe Burrow. The funny thing, Michelle, is if you extracted the team from this, and you just looked at Joe Burrow's numbers, you'd say he's the best quarterback in the NFL. He should be the MVP, but he's getting 0 MVP love because his team is 4-7.
Yeah.
As long as they keep putting up points, however, for us, we're going to be happy in fantasy, and that's certainly happening. I mean, you had Jamar Chase, you had T. Higgins, you had Chase Brown. These are the main guys doing things every week for the Bengals. So just enjoy that part. I don't think it's going away because they're going to be playing a lot of high-scoring games wherever they go.
The only issue is they get the bye this week, right? And then they play
Yeah.
the Steelers, who just shut down Lamar Jackson and that Ravens offense. But after that, they get the Cowboys, Titans, Browns. Those are all winnable games. They should help you. Like Chase Brown has been getting all the work. Great. T. Higgins, as long as he's healthy, 148 yards last night and a touchdown. Jamar Chase, 2 touchdowns, 75 yards. This offense is on fire. So hopefully they keep going. Going to be a little bit nervous about starting them in week 13 against the Steelers, but we'll get there when that time comes. Now, the Lions offense, man, I mean, Doug Peterson has to be gone, right? The Jaguars get a week 12 bye, so it might take them a day or two to fire Doug Peterson. Who knows? But the Lions absolutely destroy the Jaguars, and everyone got their fantasy points. Jared Goff, 412 passing yards, 4 touchdowns. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 161, 2 touchdowns. Jamison Williams, 124 yards and a touchdown. Both David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs finished with huge weeks. Both right now are top 5 running backs on the week in fantasy points entering Monday Night Football. But let me give you the bad news, because we know Jared Goff at home is way better, right? This offense is way better. They have to play on the road at Indy this week. Then they get the Bears and the Packers and the Bills the next 3 weeks after that. And then the Bears and the 49ers on the road. I don't think I'm going to be trusting Jared Goff much further than just this week.
Well, I think there's one question you ask about Jared Goff. If you want to know if you can play him in fantasy, are the Lions going to have success running the ball? It's a backward question to ask, you might seem, but Jared Goff does better whenever the Lions can run the ball, because what happens? It opens up the play action that Ben Johnson likes to use. It's not just play action, it's like little tendencies they change when Jared Goff is dropping back. And that's usually when you get the Jameson Williams home run play, which we saw yesterday. We also saw the Brock Wright play. The other thing is you just need a team that's going to try to keep up with them, because they're still going to pour it on to these lesser teams. We've seen it, right? We've seen it against the Cowboys. We've seen it against the Titans. We've seen it against the Jaguars. They're going to be relentlessly scoring, maybe keeping their players in a little too long in the fourth quarter. So you don't want any of those guys hurt. But look, as they play better teams, I think it means more things maybe for this offense. But you're right. I mean, Jared Goff, if they take away the run from him in any of these games, it's going to be hard for him to just independently beat these teams. So he's a very dependent quarterback. He kind of needs everything lining up. Now, if a few things are thrown off by these defenses he faces, the numbers are not going to be as good. And look, they were all because of David Montgomery and Jamar Gibbs going off, and they were just pouring it on. His touchdowns came late, remember? It was a little bit backward where they were running to score and then passing to win, to put away the game. So very interesting. I don't know if there was something personal in that game where they were relentlessly throwing the ball against the Jaguars, even when they were up big. We'll see. But there's going to be some bad blood games coming up where they want to prove themselves. So again, I'm excited to see what the Lions can do. I'm not worried about the Colts matchup. The Colts stink, and the game is indoors, and it's a very short road trip for Detroit. So I don't consider that a, quote, road game for Jared Goff. I hope I'm right on that one, and this whole offense goes off again.
Yeah, hopefully. Now, one quarterback, I don't think is going to go off this next week after going off this week. It's Matthew Stafford, 4 touchdowns against the Patriots, nearly 300 yards. Both Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp had great games. I still want to play Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp every week, obviously. I mean, these are the two main guys in this offense. Kyron Williams really comes down to that touchdown. He didn't get it. Another disappointing week for him. I think at the Eagles this week. I mean, I'm going to have Kyron Williams rank a little bit lower than normal, and Stafford just not going to be an option for me against the Eagles.
Yeah, what's happening here is that Kyron Williams, they got pass happy all of a sudden. He was the offense, the focal point of the offense, but now who's the focal point of the offense? Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Now, Williams is not finishing. I mean, he was hot, and maybe you should have traded him when he was on that roll with the touchdowns and avoided this harder stretch. And the Eagles are pretty tough, we know, on running backs, and that could be a negative game script again, which is going to take out Kyron Williams. But Eagles defense is really tough. I want to see the matchup this week is going to be very good. You get Cooper Kupp and Cooper DeJean. It could be quite a battle this week. I do think that Matthew Stafford has to have the volume to get it done, and they kind of did preemptive volume here, right? They kept throwing because the Patriots were trying to stay in the game. So I do like Stafford in better matchups. It's just extremely hard to trust him against a team like Philadelphia next week after what we saw against Miami at home just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, one quarterback we know when to trust. It's Bo Nix at home against the Falcons. 307 yards, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. But these are his last 4 home games. 23 fantasy points, 21, 30, and 29. So at home, play Bo Nix. Now, they do play on the road this week, but it's against the Raiders. Does Las Vegas count as a road game? I don't really know. I think Bo Nix is still a fine play. And then after that, it's 2 home games in a row against the Browns and Colts. So Bo Nix next 3 weeks, I'm down. I like it.
Yeah, you just said to be careful because he's a rookie and things can go up and down, and there's a very comfortable environment at home. And the Raiders' defense is kind of weird, right? They look really good at times, but then they break apart like they did against the Dolphins for most of the game. So I don't know what you're going to get. I don't necessarily want the point of the Broncos defense dominating too much where Bo Nix is not doing a lot. I think what they were doing against Falcons was just like Kirk Cousins is Mr. Comeback, right? They were like, we're going to put this game so far out of reach, we got to keep scoring. Because Kirk Cousins, even if he's down like 20 in the fourth quarter, can do something and come back. So like, okay, we're just going to take that out of the game. And that's why they kept throwing. These guys were also running wide open in the middle of the field. The Falcons secondary, by the way, was down to like the 3rd and 4th nickel and dime back. So there was nobody in coverage there. So the Raiders secondary is actually sneaky, not bad. I'm not going to bang the table for Bo Nix, but he's certainly playable this week.
2 more guys I want to talk about. Now, They're two all over the place, guys. Anthony Richardson, 3 touchdowns, 304 total yards against the Jets. They get the Lions next week. Is Anthony Richardson fully back? 272 passing yards. He put up 32 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns on the ground, 1 passing touchdown. Do you think him sitting helped him, or was it just a one-game thing?
Well, I think he is more confident, realizes that it's not a job he can take for granted. And what is he doing? He was doing a lot of the stuff that Joe Flacco was doing, throwing it up to Josh Downs, throwing it up to Alec Pierce. So he said, let me just do what he does. I have a big enough arm. Let me get it downfield. Oh, and I can run too, and I can score, which Joe Flacco can't do. So he probably learned something about this offense, right? He said, I got these receivers. I got a big arm. Let me just let it fire. Maybe he wasn't constrained also by Michael Pittman. Like, get the big plays. Downs and Pierce. These are the guys that need to be involved the most. So I think he did learn. He's a smart enough guy. He's young. You need a little bit extra time to develop. And you look at this Lions matchup, it's not great the way the Lions defense is playing of late, but I figure it's at home and Richardson should be comfortable. And I think there's enough weaknesses in the Lions secondary where they can have another good game here this week. And Richardson, by the way, the ownership of him is dropped below 50% in Yahoo League. So he's out there if you need some QB help.
Yeah, I mean, he's an option. I think it's risky to go back to him next week, but with his rushing ability, he definitely is an option. Now, Taysom Hill has the most monster week. 138 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns on the ground, 10 targets, 8 receptions, 50 yards. Like it insane. If you had him in your lineup, you won. He put up 37 points in half PPR. Like that is craziness for Taysom Hill. Unfortunately, there's a week 12 bye, but I mean, he played on a season high percentage of snaps. He had 40% of the team's scrimmage yards. He was like basically this entire offense.
Yeah, and I actually had him in a league, and what happened is I scrambled because I actually have him in the experts league that we play in. But I scrambled because I had a flex spot, and I got stuck with K. Dotton in there, and I was trying to get somebody else in there, and I'm like, oh, great. I have Taysom Hill playing on the flex. I wanted to maybe move it to a tight end, but then I'm like, I'm going to stare at Taysom Hill doing nothing. Then I look at this game by Taysom Hill, like he was the key to my victory this week. I mean, clearly he made the difference. So go figure. So Taysom Hill is just going to be used more. I mentioned that when Darren Rizzi took over. He loves Taysom Hill because he's a special teams warrior out there for him. He's kind of rewarding him. So look, Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara, I feel bad for what they were doing out there. But look, when you don't have receivers and your tight ends are questionable and you need another running back behind Alvin Kamara, it all lined up perfectly, I think, for Taysom Hill. It's not going to do that every week, but this definitely tells you that they're going to get him more involved after what he just did.
Yeah, I mean, three out of his last 5 games, he's put up at least 14 fantasy points. So it's going to be an up and down play, but he's going to win you some weeks for sure. We are going to now transition to the most disappointing plays of the week, and it starts with that Ravens-Steelers game. I guess we should have expected it. These teams always play tough, hard defenses, but man, there's a lot of disappointing performances there. So we will dig into that right after a quick break. History, economics, the great work of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. Did you study these things in school? Probably not. Or even if you did, maybe it's time for a refresher. Time and technology have changed a lot of things, but they have not changed basic fundamental truths about the world and our place in it. Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses. So some courses that you can choose from include Constitution 101, the meaning and history of Constitution, the Great American Story, A Land of Hope, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, and a brand new documentary-style course on Marxism, socialism, and communism. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon.
This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is also brought to you by Prize Picks. We always reveal our Prize Picks picks of the week on this show on Friday. If you don't know what Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action with more than 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. All you do is pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long only on Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks when you get as little as 4 correct picks right. It's the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups also stay in play. Even if one of your players get injured, your player can leave in the first half and doesn't return. It doesn't matter. Prize Picks will keep your lineup live. Sign today and you'll get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Think you have someone in mind for a night. Maybe you like Joe Mixon beating his rushing total. Well, you can go after it only on Prize Picks, and you can play that. Here on the Fantasy Show, we go more, but you can always go less and make your prediction and play that way. Just download the app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, you get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's only Prize Picks. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, Michelle, it is time to continue the show. Now let's get into some of the disappointment. We usually like to start negative and get it out of the way, but we had to talk a little bit more about this. So let's start with your game, the Ravens-Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, it was a typical game, right? Really tough defense. Chris Boswell he carried this team, right? If you had Chris Boswell for fantasy, you're super pumped. Besides that, though, the Steelers played Lamar Jackson like they always do. He struggles mightily against them. He really does. He ended up with 14 fantasy points because of the 46 rushing yards. But I mean, he's the quarterback 21 on the week so far entering Monday Night Football. That's not what you're used to from Lamar Jackson. We thought maybe Russell Wilson could put up some big numbers because this Ravens defense has been stinking. That didn't happen. I know they're talking a lot about the Ravens defense fixing themselves after that Thursday night Bengals game. I don't really know if that's what happened. I just think these two teams play each other really hard. I think Russell Wilson is one of those, this system was pretty easy to know, like they're just going to do the deep ball. They don't have a lot over the middle. It's not a hard thing to figure out. George Pickens still had a good game, 8 for 89. Najee Harris was okay because of the 4 receptions, 30 yards, 63 yards on the ground. But on the Ravens side, unless you somehow had Isaiah Likely playing, you weren't happy. I guess Derrick Henry was okay because he got the touchdown.
Yeah, what happened really was the Steelers moved the ball, and they had the field goals that went nuts with the 6 field goals. And I did have Chris Boswell in 2 leagues, by the way. But the real thing that happened there was you also had an interception by Russell Wilson in the end zone, or thrown into the end zone, the red zone. So that's 7 times the Steelers were able to move the ball rather easily on the Ravens. If they convert 2 or 3 of those, then we're not probably talking about Russell Wilson as a disappointment, right? So it was weird. The Ravens did play good situational defense. The Ravens know that the Steelers struggle in the red zone, so it kind of took advantage of that in this game to stay in the game, and they were in the game, obviously, until they couldn't convert on that 2-point conversion late. So I did think that the Steelers had success, but it kind of reminded me of the Sam Darnold game against, I think, the Jaguars last week when they kept moving, and then he turned over the ball. Like, they really should have had 3 or 4 touchdowns in this game, and it shouldn't have been close, right? I mean, they were lucky that they got out of there with the field goals, but credit the Steelers defense. They really came through. I think you have to keep in mind they're playable in every week. I mean, we might have just looked at Baltimore and said, don't play them. You're going to look at Philadelphia in 2 weeks and say, don't play them. There's a playable defense every week. That's how good they are.
Yeah. Now Russell Wilson, though, like in those 3 playoff games, like fantasy playoff games for Najee Harris and Russell Wilson and George Pickens, they get the Eagles, at the Ravens, and against the Chiefs. That is a brutal schedule. So might want to, start prepping for that if you've been counting on them. Now the Falcons offense against the Broncos, terrible, right? Kirk Cousins, 173 yards, 0 touchdowns, an interception. Michael Penix Jr. ended up coming into the game late because they were getting so destroyed. Kyle Pitts, 1 reception, 9 yards. He's starting to become that disappointment that he has been for most of his career. Drake London, 3 receptions for 61. That's the best you got out of this offense. Darnell Mooney just disappeared, also got injured in that game. And then Bijan Robinson, 62 total yards and 0 touchdowns. Just a terrible performance for them. Week 12 bye. Maybe they fix things up, but then they get the Chargers, the Vikings the next 2 weeks. Not really matchups you feel great about.
Yeah, the problem is the Falcons don't have a lot of motivation right now. So they're going to win their division. They've beaten the Buccaneers twice. So what's their motivation? It's kind of like the Texans, right? They can afford to be in a slump a little bit and work their way out of it. So when they're ready for the playoffs, they're better, right? But that was just inexcusable. It was like they were not prepared to play at all in Denver. Now, I didn't think the matchup was all that great, and I had very low expectations for that passing game, but Bijan Robinson, get him going against the Broncos. That's what you should do. Run this guy. It's just ridiculous. And I don't know. It was just a poor game plan, I think, overall by both Raheem Morris and Zach Robinson. They just weren't prepared for that game. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, say they fixed some things, but I don't know. It's hard to see that happen with a team that talented.
Now, one guy that had so much work but disappointed fantasy managers greatly was Jonathan Taylor for the Colts. 24 carries for just 57 yards, 1 reception, 3 yards, 0 touchdowns because Anthony Richardson stole the 2 rushing. But he gets the Lions this week. It's really, really hard defense for fantasy running backs. You're not going to sit Jonathan Taylor likely because he gets 24 carries, but I'm expecting another bad week, and it's been just not a very consistent fantasy year for him at all.
Yeah, and also it doesn't help when you switch your quarterbacks, right? The style of play and how much you're dependent on, and just 2 guys just throwing it up for grabs, and also not seeing enough snaps in passing situations. That is kind of doing disappointing. They insist on getting other guys there, or you have Anthony Richardson, who only likes to throw deep and run the ball and not a fan of checking down, which is a problem. So I don't know. Jonathan Taylor is one of the biggest wasted weapons, I think, in this league, and we saw that again this week.
Now, a few wide receivers who really disappointed us. Deebo Samuel, he had a great matchup, but only 4 receptions for 22 yards and 7 targets. He doesn't look good this year at all. Purdy's not really looking for him. They're not connecting. I'm kind of done trusting Deebo Samuel. You're playing him if like you're desperate, like you're just like, okay, I don't have anyone else better. But he's a low end wide receiver 2 at best, and really just kind of that flex play with some upside. Garrett Wilson, 4 receptions, 18 yards against the Colts. They have a week 12 bye, luckily, right? You don't even have to think about it for this year or for this week, but 2 straight terrible games in a row after having some good performances there in the middle of the season. And Jalen Waddle's done. Like I'm done I don't have him in anything, but if I did, like he can't go in your lineup. 2 receptions, 37 yards against the Raiders. I don't care if he ends up having a blow up game. How many times are you going to let him lose you a week?
Yeah, I'll just have some quick comments on this. This was really disappointing for Deebo because we love George Kittle, and then we knew the injury developed and he didn't play. Like we thought he was going to play as of Friday, and then things just went south. So what happened is Juwan Jennings took over. We thought Deebo might be the beneficiary. Kittle might be with Brandon Ayuk out, but Juwan Jennings, there's much better chemistry here. And Jennings just looks fast. Well, Deebo just looks slow. He might be done, as you said, Michelle. Like his history against the Seahawks, we talked about it so much. He had smashed this team, but when you don't do that, then there's something wrong. I really think the 49ers are headed toward cutting him. I don't know if I want to. I mean, you paid Jennings, you paid Ayuk, right? Why do you need this guy if he's not producing as much? So let's watch that for next year. Wilson, this Jets passing game. I mean, the one thing, I don't know, it's just a bad team overall. I'm going to skip them. Jalen Waddle, just Jonnu Smith has replaced Jalen Waddle, and Cedric Tillman. Look, I don't know if it's going to be Jerry Jeudy or Elijah Moore. Come on, like Jameis Winston, give us somebody that you're going to trust week in, week out. I just don't like it. Good for Jameis that he almost threw for 400 yards and chucked everywhere, but bad for fantasy that you're not involving their youngest, most talented receiver. So these fickle offenses, this is what it shows you. All these offenses have been rather fickle, including the 49ers. Hard to trust these players.
Yeah, and we'll get into the Browns offense because there was some good there too, right?
Yeah.
But Travis Kelce, that 2 receptions, 8 yards, 4 targets. It was against a really tough Bills defense. I feel like they knew they had to stop Kelce. They get the Panthers next week and then the Raiders. I'm not worried about Kelce whatsoever.
Yeah, Noah Gray had 2 touchdowns. So they were thrown to the tight end, but they used kind of Kelce's attention against the Bills a little bit and almost won the game. And then what a bad week for the top tight ends. Kittle scratched late in this matchup. Mark Andrews didn't do anything. DJ Hawkinson disappoints. The only guy that really came through was Brock Bowers. If you had Brock Bowers, you were happy. If you had Jonnu Smith, you were happy. But everyone else, not happy.
And Taysom Hill, you're real happy.
Yeah. Yeah, if you played him at tight end. If you play him a
Yeah.
quarterback / wide receiver, you're probably still very happy. So good stuff there. We will get into some of the things that surprised us in our final segment, Michelle.
Yeah. And we'll discuss if we think it's going to keep going on or not right after a quick break. Tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get 150 bucks in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL game all in one place. Listen, tonight's game, it doesn't seem the most exciting on paper, right? You get the Texans against the Cowboys. The Cowboys don't have Dak. They stink. You know what can make the game fun? A little bit of FanDuel action. If you think maybe the Cowboys will surprise, they're plus 7.5. Maybe you go that way. If you think the Texans are going to kick their butt, like I do, then you go the minus 7.5. And then even if you get to the middle of the game, you're like, you know what? Yeah, this game is boring. I want to do, get some action in. FanDuel's perfect for that. You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You could do live game action as well. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Okay, I don't know if it counts as most surprising player, right? Like we said, this could definitely happen. Jameis Winston, 395 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think the most surprising thing is 0 interceptions for him. So a really good fantasy day. And it's now been 2 good fantasy weeks out of his 3 starts this season. 24 points, 10 points, and 27 points. So like he still has it in him to be a great fantasy producer. But this week it was Jerry Jeudy who got all of his targets, and he's been targeting Jerry Jeudy like crazy, but 142 yards a touchdown. Now 89 of those 142 yards came on that 1 touchdown. I will say the schedule's looking rough for this offense moving forward. They get the Steelers this week, then Denver, and then at Pittsburgh, and then the Chiefs. So maybe you can play these guys again in week 16 against the Bengals, but not looking forward to playing any of them in those tough matchups.
Yeah, you definitely can't trust them against the Steelers on a short week this week. So no way. Like I'm not going there. I know there's 6 teams on a bye and we're going to be stretching ourselves a little bit, but you can't go there at all this
maybe
week.
Maybe Jeudy, maybe Njoku. But like, you're not getting cute with Winston. You can't get cute with Elijah Moore or Cedric. Like Cedric Tillman still got 8 targets. I do want to say that. Like Cedric Tillman can still be good moving forward. It's just a really, really hard schedule.
Yeah, it's going to be hard week to week again. You don't know where the ball's going to go. It's going to be a little bit matchup based. I mean, it is a Ken Dorsey offense, so they're going to throw as much as possible now, especially with the running game sputtering.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just like Jeudy, 11 targets in each of the last 2 games. So there's potential there for him. I would consider playing him this week, but not Winston. That's for sure against the Steelers. Now Jaxon Smith-Njigba, 2 straight great weeks for him as well. He didn't get a touchdown this week, but 11 targets, 10 receptions, 110 yards. He has 290 yards over his last 2 games, 24 targets. He seems to fully have taken over this role instead of the Tyler Lockett, getting the targets. It's going to JSN and it's working. So I do think JSN is a player you want in your lineup moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's just looks locked in. I was looking at that final drive. I'm sorry, Michelle. I know we had the 49ers were locked and you were hoping they came through, but they did not stop that combination at all. And then Gino ran it in, much like Josh Allen ran it in to win the game. So, yeah, JSN and Gino really feeling it, even maybe more so than him and DK Metcalf.
Yeah, I mean, DK Metcalf's still a great play each week because he can get those big plays. But JSN has been, he's looking like he's consistent. They get the Cardinals this week. The Cardinals has weirdly been good, but you're going to play JSN. Now, Christian Watson gets the 49ers, who JSN just destroyed. He gets them this week after a 150-yard performance on 4 receptions. This is what Christian Watson does, right? There'll be a random game he goes off, and then next week he'll have 2 receptions for 20 yards. So I'm not buying into Watson. I'm not doing it. I'm not going to get fooled again.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say, however, this 49ers, when we look at them on their schedule, oh, great. It's a tough matchup defensively.
Oh, yeah, they're definitely beatable.
Yeah, they're not. It's not anymore because Nick Bosa's hurt again. Javarius Ward has been hurt. They're pretty weak.
Javarius Ward lost his daughter.
Yeah, so
that's why he's not playing. And he's
he's been out of the lineup, which I meant to say instead. But thanks for that. But yeah, he's been out too. So their pass defense hasn't been great, right? I mean, they really didn't do much to stop the Seahawks down the stretch. Like usually Nick Bosa would be out there getting a sack. So good stuff there that is available, but you can't trust Watson. Again, he'll probably be pivoting to Romeo Doubs or Dontavian Wicks or Tucker Kraft. Someone else is going to probably do the deed against the 49ers this week.
Yeah, if you want someone like what JSN can do, I feel like that's Jaden Reed. Like he could beat up this 49ers defense. I'm not going to trust Watson to come down with a big play. It's more of those short stuff that is really killing the 49ers. So Marquez Valdes-Scantling, I love this for him. I really do. It's just hilarious. I love this for fantasy football because of how funny it is. But 2 receptions, 87 yards, and a touchdown. He gets his touchdown, and that's all he needs, right? But he is truly playing. Like, I feel like he just took over the Rashid Shaheed role, right? Yeah. And that role has worked. Shaheed had a lot of good fantasy games. Now they get a bye week, but then after that, the Rams, the Giants, Commanders, like he could have that long touchdown again. But 2 weeks in a row now with good fantasy production, and his offensive snaps keep increasing every week that he's with the team. So MVS, he's a boomer bust play, but he's an option.
Yeah, MVS is the new Jameson Williams. If the running game works and you got to worry about it and you got a play action quarterback, Derek Carr / Jared Goff, you're going to have a chance at a big play. So keep in mind, if their cornerback coverage is weak and you looked at both of these matchups, you said the corners give up a lot of big plays and the teams stink against the run, that's the magic formula for the big play for Carr and Goff. And that's why you saw MVS do his best Mike or Jameson Williams impression in that game.
Yeah, it's going to be funny if he keeps doing this. If he ends up winning fantasy managers leagues, that would be a good time for everybody. Now, Kendrick Bourne, 5 receptions, 70 yards, and a touchdown. He has 6 targets and 5 targets the last 2 games. We know Bourne is he's a talented wide receiver, right? He's coming off the ACL tear. Maybe it just took him time to get fully back and healthy. I'm not really buying into it. And they get the Dolphins next week, not the easiest secondary to beat.
Yeah, I mean, Drake May is playing better, and he's distributing the ball, and he's making mistakes, but he's still kind of trying to find his guys, right? We've had some Jalen Polk sightings. We've had some Kayshon Boutte sightings. But the main 3 guys to me are the 3, quote, veterans on this team, and DeMar Douglas is still pretty young. But Kendrick Bourne is definitely a veteran. Hunter Henry's definitely been around. And then Douglas being this short area guy. So these are the 3, if you're desperate during these bye weeks, for Patriots targets, and they're widely available. Kendrick Bourne is almost available in every league. Douglas is still rather available, and somehow Hunter Henry is still available in more than half of leagues to help you during these buys.
Yeah, Hunter Henry again, 9 targets, 6 receptions, 63 yards. It's nothing crazy. It's not winning you weeks, but also like in a tight end spot, that's fantastic. It really is. Now, talking about a tight end that's going to be playing against his old team this week in the same game, that Miami Dolphins game, it's Jonnu Smith, who has 2 touchdowns this week, 101 yards. And he gets the Patriots. Is this a revenge game? Are you trusting Jonnu Smith moving forward? He has had a couple big weeks this year, and then a lot of just like doing nothing.
Yeah, the surprise is Jonnu Smith was actually owned in more than half of Yahoo leagues going in, maybe following and chasing the points from last week. But I really believe that Jalen Waddle's been disappointing. The fact that I think it's like Tyreek Hill or Jonnu Smith are the main guys now for Tua Tagovailoa when it's not Devin Achane going nuts in the backfield. So I think they just are good at scheming Smith. I've always liked him. He's got good athleticism. He just hasn't been used really well. I mean, with the Titans, there was limitations. The Patriots, he was sharing with Hunter Henry. So you didn't see a lot of the action. He couldn't stay healthy either. That's also been an issue. But now he's fully healthy. They're throwing short passes here with Tua. They're not always dependent on, I'm not going to throw a 70-yard bomb to Tyreek Hill. They're trying to work the middle of the field a little bit more. That's why Jonnu is benefiting and Jalen Waddle is struggling.
Yeah, he has a chance in this matchup for sure. We saw Kobe Parkinson come down with a 19-yard receiving touchdown, and Parkinson normally does nothing, but he did that against the Patriots. So there's something to hold on to there. We'll see how high I have him ranked once I do my rankings. But that is it for our Week 11 reactions. We will start tomorrow prepping you for Week 12 with our waiver wires, and then reacting to Monday Night Football, of course, if anything crazy happens. But I'm not expecting that in this game tonight. Please give us a like on whatever podcast app you're listening to. Give us a subscribe on YouTube. That'd be greatly appreciated. We will talk to you tomorrow. Bye, y'all.